Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below. I absolutely love seeing how far these Wild West tales travel. The saloon smelled of cheap whiskey and rain-drenched dust. Spring had come to Dry Creek with a moody wind, brushing wildflower petals into corners where boots had stomped stories into floorboards for years. Outside, the wind swirled like it didn't know which direction to go. Inside, men gathered around a splintered poker table under a lamplight's flicker, faces lined with greed and smoke. Clint Dalton sat at the edge of that circle, huge, wordless, alone. He'd earned his silence like he'd earned every scar, quietly and without complaint. Folks called him the giant, not just for his size, but for the way he carried loneliness like it was another man's burden. His shoulders sloped with it. His boots barely scuffed the floor when he moved, yet when he sat, it felt like the room had to breathe around him. He hadn't come to gamble. He never did. But tonight, something in the air, it had the ache of unfinished business. So he played. One by one, men folded. Cards slapped down like half-hearted promises. Coins clinked like funeral bells. Clint's stack rose, but his face never changed. Not when he bluffed, not when he won. He didn't drink, didn't smile, didn't gloat. Then came the final hand. One man left across from him. Thin, slick-haired, too young to know how heavy desperation could get. A drifter type, smelling of salt water and soot, claiming to have sailed from the ports of San Francisco. He called himself Dixon, though that likely wasn't true. Last hand, Dixon said, voice oily. Winner takes all. Clint didn't answer, just looked at his cards like they meant less than dirt. Dixon grinned, showed a flash of gold tooth. Can't offer silver anymore. Lost my horse, my gun, my boots, hell, even my coat. He reached behind him, tugged 3 figures forward from the shadowed corner. But I've still got them. Gasps moved through the room like prairie fire. 3 girls, barefoot, eyes downcast, silk hair tangled from travel and shame. They were too still, like deer watching for the shot. Clint's hand hovered over his cards, then fell to his lap. Not in shock, just in stillness. Like grief paused. They ain't yours to wager, someone muttered. But no one stopped Dixon. He shoved the girls forward. They came with the deal when I lost a mine. Man told me to cash them in. What better place than here, with you fine gentlemen? Someone snorted, someone else spat. Nobody stood. Clint looked up. His eyes met the eldest girl's first. Her face was streaked with soot, but her back remained straight. Maybe 24, maybe less. Not beautiful in a painted way. Beautiful in the way a tree clings to its last blossom after a storm. Her lip bled where someone had split it, but her gaze didn't tremble. Next to her, a smaller girl barely 20, chin quivering. Behind them, the youngest, still more girl than woman, stared straight at Clint with fire instead of fear. They weren't girls. They were something sacred left in the mud. Call or fold. Dixon pushed. Clint picked up his cards, laid them down. A full house. Dixon cursed, slammed his chair back, and stomped out without the girls, without his boots, without a single glance back. The room fell into a hush thick enough to chew. The girls stood still. Clint stood up, and every pair of eyes watched him as he walked toward them. Not fast, not with swagger. Just steady, as if they were horses scared to the bit, and he didn't want to spook them. He didn't touch them, didn't speak right away. Just removed his hat and nodded once. You got no debt to me, he said, voice like gravel warmed by the sun. But you can come. I got space. The eldest's brow furrowed. The youngest stepped forward like she might strike him. The middle one trembled. You got names? He asked softer. The eldest gave a tiny bow. Lien Mei. The second, eyes down, Xiaolan. The third snapped, bowing. And we're not yours. Clint nodded once. No, ma'am. You ain't. The saloon watched them walk out in silence, for shadows stretching long into the lamplit night. Clint carried nothing but his coat. He offered it to Xiaolan when the wind cut too deep. They reached his horse. He helped them into the wagon he'd borrowed that afternoon. No one spoke. Rain began to fall soft as sighs. The road to Clint's place wound between cottonwoods and the last buds of peach trees. The air was clean there, away from the stink of men. His cabin stood where grass bent from memory, not trampling. He opened the door, stepped back, let them enter first. Inside, a simple hearth, warm from the morning's fire. Blankets folded on a pinewood bench. Cornbread cooling near the window. A carving of a deer by the mantel. Every corner whispered of use, not decoration. Clint placed a kettle on the stove. Didn't ask questions. Didn't offer apologies. Bo Ing glared at him. You think we owe you now? No. You gonna make us work? No. You expect something? He looked at her, slow and sorrowful. Not expecting anything. Xiao Lan clutched Lian Mei's arm. Why are we here? Clint poured water into cups, slid one toward each of them. Because no one else stood, he said. That ain't love. That ain't heroics. It's just not being like the rest of them. He rose. There's 3 beds. Use any you want. I'll sleep in the barn for now. Food's on the shelf. I'll be up at dawn. He left without waiting for thanks. That night, they didn't sleep much. Wind moaned against the shutters. Xiao Lan cried. Bo Ing cursed. Lian Mei sat upright near the window, watching Clint through the cracked pane, him settling a blanket over his horse in the barn, shoulders bent under some weight she didn't yet understand. In the days that followed, he never came inside unless asked. He left bread, soap, apples from the tree down the slope. He never asked their stories, but he listened through the walls as they sang in soft Mandarin, voices like threads of silk catching sun. Bo Ing tested him. Demanded tools. Broke plates. He fixed them. Jed and Bo came once, asking questions, but he didn't explain. Just said, they're staying here a while. And that was that. On the 4th morning, Lian Mei stepped out onto the porch. He was splitting wood. You don't talk much, she said. He nodded. Why did you really take us? He paused, axe held midair, then said quietly, because sometimes a man knows what it's like to be won in a game and treated less than decent after. She studied him, and he looked up, eyes soft and endless like prairie sky. And I figured maybe that don't gotta be how your story ends. She turned to go, then stopped. You don't know our story. No, he said. But you looked me in the eye that night. Like maybe I didn't scare you. That's more story than most ever gave me. She didn't answer, but her lips lifted. Barely. That night, she set 3 cups instead of 4. And when he stepped onto the porch to sleep again, Bo Ing threw a blanket at him. Don't be stupid, she muttered. It's cold. And you're big. You'll freeze. He smiled, maybe for the first time in months. Just a flicker. Inside the cabin, Lian Mei whispered something to Xiao Lan. Words in Chinese. Xiao Lan asked, what did he say when he won us? Lian Mei looked toward the darkened door. He said we weren't his. She paused, then added with wonder. But he's the first man who's ever meant it. And outside, Clint stared at the stars, wondering if a man could start again not by fighting for something, but by refusing to take what wasn't his. The days slipped by like creek water under thawed ice, quiet, steady, unseen unless you listen close. Spring sun crept in through the cabin's warped shutters, lighting the dust motes as they danced above wooden floorboards scrubbed clean by hands that had never been offered peace. And still, Clint Dalton never stepped past the threshold unless invited. Every morning, he laid out bread wrapped in cloth and tin mugs filled with well water. He never knocked, just left the offering like something sacred and stepped away. The sisters would wait until they heard his footsteps fade across the porch planks before opening the door. Inside, they settled like ghosts unsure if they were allowed to haunt. Lian Mei took to the hearth, not because she was asked, but because idle hands made her skin itch with old panic. She cooked plainly, rice when she could find it, beans and eggs when she could not. Her movements were graceful but tight, like a dancer still wearing chains. She spoke little, but her eyes catalogued everything. The color of the curtains, the soft creak in the rocking chair, the way Clint's boots never left mud prints inside. Xiao Lan, soft-spoken and slower to wake, spent her hours gathering herbs near the creek bed. She dried them on windowsills, whispering to herself in Mandarin. Her fingers stitched small flowers into the hem of her one plain dress, the thread barely visible to anyone but her. She did not sing, not yet, but sometimes she hummed as if trying to remember who she was before her voice learned to tremble. And Bo-ing, sharp as broken glass, moved through the cabin like a storm trapped in a jar. She tested the walls, the stairs, the man. She slammed the kettle, banged plates, left doors ajar when Clint was near just to see if he'd yell. But he never did, only closed them gently after. "You're waiting," she said to Lien Mei one evening, "for him to become like them." Lien Mei stirred the pot over the fire, slow and steady. "No, I'm waiting to see if I can become someone who doesn't expect that." Bo-ing huffed, but her eyes flicked toward the door. Clint's shadow had passed by earlier, slow, heavy, always alone. The town didn't forget. Whispers drifted up the hill like wood smoke, simmered in the mouth of every woman hanging laundry, every man sipping whiskey with a squint. Clint Dalton, the giant, keeping 3 foreign girls at his ranch? Disgraceful, suspicious, unnatural. Mrs. Wilma Crowley, with her Bible clasped tight to a bosom full of judgment, told the preacher flat out, "He's hiding something wicked." But the preacher only sighed. "Perhaps he's hiding something broken. That's not always the same thing." Clint heard the rumors. He just didn't answer them. Some men carry shame that isn't theirs like it is, quietly, with grace. The weight sat on his back like a second saddle, worn smooth by years of being misread. One cloudy morning, he left a small box on the cabin steps. Lien Mei opened it to find a music box inside, its carvings chipped, the mechanism rusted. She hadn't seen it in years, not since a man with dead eyes took it from her in San Francisco. Now here it was again, mended with wire and oil, soft melody returning like a bird to a familiar branch. She didn't ask how Clint had found it, but she watched him longer after that. That same week, Bo-ing tried to return a pot Clint had left on the porch. He didn't answer her knock. She opened the barn door herself, stomped in, found him brushing down his horse like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. She tossed the pot down. "We're not your wives." He didn't look up, didn't say you were, then stopped treating us like we're yours to feed. The brush slowed. "I ain't feeding you. I'm feedin' what ain't been fed in too long." She stared at him, unsure if he was mocking her. He turned. Pride, peace, safety, that sort of thing. Bo-ing wanted to throw something, scream, run. Instead, she looked at his hands, big, weathered, full of calluses, and realized they'd never touched her. Not once. That night, she told Xiao-lan, maybe he's broken, like us, but quiet about it. Xiao-lan only nodded. She had started setting her herbs near Clint's barn. Quiet gifts for quiet men. As spring deepened, so did the rhythm of their strange life. Lien Mei swept the porch each morning. Xiao-lan placed wildflowers in a chipped vase by the window. Bo-ing chopped wood, muttering curses, daring Clint to comment. He only nodded his thanks and passed her a fresh pair of gloves. And then one evening, the sheriff came. Sheriff Hollis Boone, with a mustache like prairie brush and a voice made of gravel. He came on horseback, slow and heavy, eyes scanning every shutter like they might reveal some sin. Clint stepped down from the barn, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Evenin', Sheriff." Boone didn't dismount. "Evenin', Clint. Town's talkin'. Thought I'd ride up, see for myself." "Ain't much to see," Clint said. "No." Boone looked toward the window, where Lien Mei stood just out of view. "Folks say you got yourself a house full of foreign girls. That they ain't free." Clint's jaw twitched. "They're freer here than they've ever been." "Maybe so. Still, don't sit easy with folks. Can't say I blame them." Clint didn't answer. Boone leaned forward in his saddle. "I know you, Clint. Know you ain't never raised your voice, never laid a hand. But it only takes one moment, one bad guess, and the law comes knocking louder." Clint met his eyes. "Then I'll keep giving them no reason to." Boone stared long and hard, then nodded once. "Just keep it clean and quiet." The sheriff turned and rode off, dust curling in his wake. That night, Lien Mei stood on the porch as Clint carved something small in the moonlight. He doesn't trust you, she said. No. Do you care? He paused. Only if it makes your lives harder. She sat beside him. The night was cool, the stars scattered like rice in black silk. I keep waiting, she whispered, for the price to show itself. He handed her what he'd been carving, a peach blossom, rough but delicate. Not everything's bought, but everything costs something. He nodded. Sometimes a man just wants to sleep knowing he gave peace to someone who forgot what it felt like. She held the carving like it might disappear. Do you ever get angry? She asked. Clint took a breath. I don't have the right. Not anymore. She didn't press, but her fingers tightened around the blossom. Inside, Boeing tossed in her sleep. Xiao Lan muttered soft prayers in her dreams. The wind rose, brushing peach petals off their stems. And far down in town, Wilma Crowley lit a lantern and muttered, This ain't over. No, sir. Not while girls like them take root in a place meant for good Christian women. Morning would come soon, and with it, something neither Clint nor the sisters had yet named, something soft, slow, and forming just beyond the edges of what they'd ever known. A shadow moved across the porch, and this time, when Clint looked up, Lien May did not look away. The horses arrived in a cloud of dust and morning light, hooves thudding like memory on hollow ground. From the cabin window, Lien May watched the two figures approach, one tall and steady, the other lean and laughing, as if the road itself told jokes to keep him entertained. Clint had risen before dawn as usual, already hauling water from a well, sleeves rolled up, back glinting with sweat. When he heard the sound of riders, he didn't stiffen. He simply stood straighter. Jed and Bo Dalton had come. The older brother rode a chestnut, gelding with a limp not unlike his own, slow and measured. A war wound had left Jed's right leg stiff, and his face bore the lines of someone who'd seen too much and said too little about it. He had gray creeping into his temples and a knife on each hip, not for show. Bo, younger by 7 years, rode like a man who never believed the ground would betray him. His smile was too easy, too quick. But his eyes, those eyes carried more weight than he let on. They dismounted in silence. Jed was the first to speak. Heard you won 3 girls in a poker game, Clint. His tone wasn't cruel, just plain. Clint nodded once. Didn't mean to. Bo whistled low. Most fellas would call that luck. Clint wiped his hands on his trousers. Most fellas don't know what luck really is. The door behind him creaked open, slow and cautious. Bo Ing stepped out first, chin raised like a drawn bow. Xiao Lan lingered behind her, face half hidden by the porch post. Lien May followed last, calm and poised, the way the moon is calm no matter what the tide does. The Dalton brothers turned. Bo Ing narrowed her eyes. You the other giants? Bo laughed aloud. I like her. Jed tipped his hat, nodding toward Xiao Lan, but saying nothing. His gaze was polite but unreadable. Bo gave Bo Ing a long look, then broke into a lopsided grin. I'm Bo, he said. Which of y'all is gonna make me earn your name? Bo Ing crossed her arms. Keep guessing. Clint rubbed his brow, exhaling. They're here for the Orchard Festival. Is that what we said? Bo teased. Clint gave him a look that stopped further mischief. Inside, the sisters returned to their quiet duties. But that evening, the rhythm of the house changed. Jed sat on the porch sharpening his knife. Xiao Lan brought him tea, without being asked. Bo tried to impress Bo Ing with juggling, failed, and made her laugh so hard she spilled the wash basin. Lien May observed all of it, her hand steady on the dishcloth, her thoughts less so. That night, over a modest supper, Jed finally spoke. You keeping them here forever? No, Clint said. Just as long as they want to stay. And what do they want? Jed asked. Clint glanced at Lien May. She met his eyes, then looked away. They want to be free of debt, he said. And fear. Jed leaned back. You're not one for easy roads, are you? Clint gave a small smile. Never have been. The next day, the brothers stayed on. The town's Orchard Festival, small, humble, dusted in blossom petals, drew folks from neighboring ranches. There were pies cooling on planks, fiddles warming up in the shade, and too many glances cast toward the Dalton cabin on the hill. Clint hadn't planned on bringing the girls. But Bo Ing insisted. "You can't hide us like secrets," she said. "We've been hidden long enough." And so they came. Lien Mei wore a soft blue dress that Xiao Lan had altered by hand, its hem stitched with tiny pink flowers. Her hair, long and pinned with care, shimmered in the morning sun. Xiao Lan's sleeves were embroidered with white cranes. Bo Ing wore red, defiant and bright, her hair braided like a warrior's. They walked down the hill together, Clint in front, his brothers flanking either side. Townsfolk parted like wheat before wind. Wilma Crowley clutched her cross. The blacksmith paused mid-swing. Children whispered. Clint didn't waver. His brothers didn't laugh. They just walked. Lien Mei moved like she didn't hear them. She focused on the way the light hit the peach trees, on the bees, the bloom, the hope. At the heart of the orchard, music played. Couples danced. Jed stood back, nursing a flask, while Xiao Lan sat on a nearby bench, folding paper cranes and humming softly. Bo snuck behind Bo Ing and offered her a caramel apple. She took it, stared at it, then threw it at him. It hit his chest and stuck. She laughed. So did he. That evening, the sisters returned to the cabin different. Xiao Lan hummed louder as she swept the floor. Bo Ing sat beside Bo by the fire, asking him to show her how to read wanted posters in English. Lien Mei took Clint's coat, without a word, and stitched up a torn seam. Jed smoked a pipe alone on the porch. "He didn't tell us they were real," he said when Clint joined him. "What did you expect?" Clint replied. Jed blew out a plume of smoke. "Something broken. Something that needed fixing." "They don't need fixing." Jed nodded. "No, but maybe they needed to be seen." There was a long pause. The sun dipped and stars blinked awake. "I ain't got much to offer," Clint said finally. "But I wanted Em to know not every man takes." "You ever think about keeping one?" Jed asked, not cruel, not mocking. Clint didn't answer right away. Then, "I think about not scaring her." Jed looked at his brother. "You never could." Inside, the fire crackled low. Bo Ing leaned against the armrest where Bo sat, pretending not to notice how her head touched his knee. Xiao Lan quietly folded another crane. Lien Mei stood near the window, watching Clint's shadow stretch across the porch. The next day, Jed carved a walking stick for Xiao Lan, twisting the handle into a curve shaped like a blooming tree. He left it on the windowsill and didn't speak of it. Bo tried again with the caramel apple. This time, Bo Ing ate it slowly while looking straight at him. Lien Mei took a long walk with Clint beneath the orchard trees. She asked him, "Why did you bring your brothers here?" He answered, "Thought maybe they could see something good. Maybe remember that love doesn't always show up loud." "And what about you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I hear it in the quiet." They paused under a peach tree. She touched the bark. "You think these things ever get used to where they're planted?" "They don't have to," he said. "They just have to bloom anyway." That night, when the sisters were asleep, Bo stood on the porch with Jed and Clint. "She sharp, that one," Bo said. "Dangerously so," Clint replied. "And you?" Jed asked. Clint looked up at the stars. "I ain't sure yet, but I know I breathe easier when she's near." Jed didn't say anything, just nodded and lit his pipe. Then Bo said, "You think they'll stay?" Clint's face turned thoughtful. "I think they'll choose. And I'll let them." The porch settled into silence. Then a sudden shout broke the stillness. Bo Ing had come outside, eyes wide, pointing down the hill. A rider approached, fast, kicking up dirt like a storm. No one recognized him, but he carried the gait of a man with something to reclaim. And in his saddlebag, the past. The wind that morning carried petals down like blessings, peach blossoms drifting over the Dalton Ranch in a hush, so holy it might have been mistaken for silence. Spring had taken root, not just in soil, but in the way people looked at each other differently, softer, as if the winter that had kept hearts locked tight had finally melted, and what stirred underneath was not what anyone expected. Lien Mei stood at the edge of the orchard, one hand brushing the rough bark of a tree just beginning to bud. She wasn't thinking of San Francisco. She wasn't thinking of a card game. She was thinking of her name, How often it had been called like a command, never a question. But when Clint said it, it fell like water, low, respectful, unhurried. Behind her, Xiaolan knelt beside the garden bed, coaxing green from tired earth. Jed had built it for her, slowly and without fanfare, hammering each plank with his bad leg braced and his brow lined in effort. He never asked to be thanked. He just handed her the trowel one morning, nodded toward the soil, and said, "Figured you might want a place that grows back." She hadn't answered, but she'd knelt down and started planting seeds. Bo-ing rode horses now. Not well, not always steady, but enough to make the wind tear through her braids, and her heart race like it remembered something from when she was still a girl and untouched by hands that wanted only to take. Bo had taught her, laughing through her swearing, catching her when she fell, and pretending his hand slipped just to hold hers a second longer. Change had crept in not like a storm, but like sunlight at dawn, soft, then suddenly everywhere. Still, Lien May held back. One afternoon, Clint was chopping wood behind the barn when she approached, shawl draped across her shoulders, eyes unreadable. "I want to ask you something," she said. He wiped his brow and looked up. "You can ask anything." "Why haven't you touched me?" The axe paused mid-swing. She wasn't angry, not cold, just searching for truth with a calm that trembled underneath. "You brought me here, protected me, gave me food, a bed, safety, and yet nothing." He set the axe down and leaned against a stump, looking out toward the orchard. "Because love don't grow where it's owed," he said quietly. "And I figured maybe you deserved something that didn't come with expectation." Lien May stepped closer. "But I've been waiting for the other kind. The kind that hurts." "I know," he said. "But I ain't that man." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. "I'm not sure who I am anymore." "You're someone who knows what things shouldn't feel like," he replied. "That's more than most." She swallowed hard. "If I stayed, if I chose, would you have me?" "Not out of guilt. Not out of rescue." He stood slowly, eyes deep and sure. "I would have you, because you are the only thing in my life that has ever made silence feel like peace instead of punishment." They didn't touch. Not yet. But the space between them no longer felt like fear. The same week, Jed limped out to where Xiaolan tended her herbs and knelt beside her with great difficulty. He held something wrapped in a cloth, a simple chain with a wooden locket carved into a crane. "I ain't got a lot left," he murmured, "but I can offer steadiness. I can build things slow. I can protect." Xiaolan touched the locket, eyes shining. "I don't need a man to save me." "Good," he said. "I need a woman who doesn't wait to be saved." She nodded once, then twice, and helped him to his feet. In the stables, Boeing found a note in Bo's boot. "If you're ever bored of throwing apples at me, I'd like to court you proper. I've asked your sister's permission." She laughed at me, but didn't say no. She found him fixing fence posts, shirt damp with sweat and sawdust in his hair. He looked up nervously. She didn't say a word, just walked straight up and kissed him on the mouth. That night, the three sisters stood beneath the peach tree out back, moonlight catching their dresses and the curve of their thoughts. Xiaolan reached out, took her elder sister's hand. "Do you remember Mama's story about the paper names?" Lien May nodded. "How they burn them when a girl leaves her house. Because she is no longer who she was." "And who are we now?" Bo-ing whispered. Lien May looked toward the barn, the cabin, the orchard. "We are not who we were traded as," she said. "We are not what they wagered." The next morning, the Dalton men stood in front of the small, whitewashed church that overlooked Dry Creek Valley. No invitations were sent. No fanfare. But word spread like honeysuckle, slow and sweet and hard to ignore. They came dressed in their best, Clint in a clean white shirt and his father's old vest, Jed in a coat stitched at the seams, Bo with wildflowers stuck in his boot. The sisters wore dresses sewn from scratch by their own hands. No veils, no lace, just simplicity and the quiet weight of choosing. The preacher said the words. The rings were plain, wood carved and oiled by Clint's hands under lamplight. Wilma Crowley stood at the back with crossed arms and a pinched mouth. But she didn't speak. Not this time. When the vows were spoken, no one cried. But the wind shifted, and petals fell like snow over the couple's bowed heads. Later, they gathered beneath the peach trees for bread and tea and small laughter. Xiaolan leaned into Jed's shoulder. Bo Ying sat cross-legged beside Bo, daring him to out-eat her. Lian Mei stood with Clint at the edge of the orchard, watching the light paint gold across the grass. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not naming me yours." Clint smiled, slow and deep. "You named yourself mine." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "My name is still Yan Mei," she said, "but I want a new middle name, one that means rooted." He took the paper, held it close like it might vanish in wind. "Then let this be the spring where your name began." They turned to walk back, steps falling in rhythm, not forced, not planned, just earned. At the base of the hill, a rider waited. Not fast like the last. This one sat his horse with old arrogance. A slow sneer spread across his sunburnt face. The girls froze. The Dalton brothers stepped forward, calm but ready. The man tipped his hat, eyes cutting like a blade. "Thought I'd come see what became of my winnings." Clint didn't speak. He didn't have to, because behind him, Lian Mei stepped out. No fear, no tremble, and said, clear and hard as flint, "You never won us. You just lost what you never deserved." The man grinned. "Then I guess I came to lose again." He turned his horse. But before he rode off, he glanced back once, at the peach trees, at the girls who would not bow, at the men who stood with quiet pride. Then he vanished into the dust. That night, under stars too bright to hide from, Lian Mei stood on the porch and whispered to Clint, "I think today, for the first time, I belong to no one but myself." Clint kissed her hand and held it. But far down the valley, in a room of glass and oil lamps, Wilma Crowley dipped her quill into ink and wrote her sister back east. "Told you so. He married one. The other two too. This place is changing, and I'm not sure the Lord approves." She folded the letter, but paused before sealing it. Outside, the wind carried laughter, and a girl's name that had never been spoken with so much honor. Bo Ying's laughter echoed through the orchard like wind chimes stirred by warm wind, sharp, musical, and utterly unafraid. Her belly had begun to swell beneath her apron, rounding out the sharp angles of her small frame. She walked barefoot now, even on the rocky earth, daring the world to give her something she couldn't carry. Bo followed her like a shadow that knew when to give space and when to shield her from it. Inside the cabin, Lian Mei arranged 3 bowls of soup on the table. The broth shimmered with ginger and spring onion, delicate and clear. She'd learned to flavor it like Clint liked, simple, clean, honest. He stepped through the doorway, hat in hand, hair damp with sweat and a trace of sawdust still on his sleeve. When he looked at her, it was never quick or idle. It was reverent, like she was the first quiet thing that ever stayed in his world of noise and work. The cabin had changed, not in walls or wood, but in the air. Where once silence pressed like weight, now it floated, full of breath and being. 3 marriages, 1 baby on the way, and still no promises made in haste. Just choices, day after day, to keep showing up. The town had grown quieter in its gossip. Respect had replaced curiosity, even if it came slow and reluctant. What folks couldn't explain, they learned to live beside. The orchard was in bloom again, blushing pinks and whites across the green hills. This time, it wasn't just a backdrop to new beginnings. It was a place of roots, of things planted, tested, and not only surviving, but flourishing. Jed sat on the porch, whittling a spoon with his good hand, while Xiaolan embroidered a prayer into a cloth for the baby. She no longer flinched when someone called her name. Her voice had returned like a slow stream fed by rain. She'd begun teaching the town children how to press herbs and make teas. Mrs. Crowley's own granddaughter came once a week, despite the woman's pursed lips and tightened jaw. Wilma hadn't written another letter. At the edge of the orchard, a crowd gathered, neighbors, ranchers, townsfolk, and a preacher with a book too small for the size of his presence. They'd come not for a wedding this time, but something rarer, a naming. Bo Ying had insisted on it. "He'll be born here," she said, brushing peach petals from her shoulder. "And he should be from here. Not borrowed, not carried over, born with roots." So they gathered, baskets of bread passed around, laughter rippling like music under the trees. The preacher stood on a crate, voice strong. "This child shall be called James Bo Dalton, son of this land, blood of two worlds." When Bo held his son up, the baby blinked at the sunlight, wrinkled his nose, and let out a cry as if he already had opinions about it all. Bo Ing kissed his forehead and whispered something in Mandarin that only Xiao Lan and Lien Mei understood. It meant grow bold, but bend in wind. Clint stood near the back, arms folded, eyes damp. Lien Mei took his hand. "Does it feel like too much?" she asked. "No," he said. "Feels like enough." Later, as the crowd thinned and the sky turned soft gold, a rider appeared at the edge of the road. For a heartbeat, Clint's hand dropped to his side. But it wasn't trouble this time. It was a courier. He dismounted and handed Clint a folded piece of paper with the government seal. Jed looked up, squinting. "What's that?" Clint opened it. His eyes scanned the page once. Then again. Bo Ing leaned forward, baby in arms. "Well." Clint cleared his throat. "It's official recognition. Of our marriages. Of their status. They're citizens now. All three." Silence held for a breath. Then Bo Ing let out a whoop that startled the crows from the trees. Bo laughed, catching her waist. Xiao Lan clutched Jed's hand. Lien Mei turned toward Clint, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled, full and real. "They can't take us now," she whispered. "No," he said. "They never could. But now the law agrees." That night, they lit lanterns all along the porch and ate dumplings and pie until their stomachs ached. Bo sang off-key. Bo Ing played the harmonica badly and with flair. Xiao Lan told a story in Mandarin, while Jed nodded along like he understood every word. Lien Mei danced once, just once, under the trees, Clint's hand on the small of her back, their steps slow and certain. It wasn't a celebration of survival. It was a declaration of arrival, of belonging. Later, as the lanterns dimmed and the wind cooled, Clint sat alone on the porch. Lien Mei stepped out behind him, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her hair unbound for the first time in public. She handed him a cup of tea. "I've been thinking," she said. He sipped. "Dangerous." She smiled. "I want to build something, not just live in what you've made." He looked at her. "What do you want?" "A school," she said. "For girls like us, who've been through too much and told too little. I want them to learn English, and how to plant, and how to speak and not apologize for it." Clint leaned back, thoughtful. "Then we'll build it," he said. "Will they come?" "They will," he said. "Not all at once, but they'll come." She reached for his hand. Just then, a breeze rustled the peach trees, scattering petals across the porch. They watched them fall, two people no longer waiting for the other shoe or hand to drop. From inside, baby James began to cry. Bo Ying's voice followed. "Clint, he only stops if you walk him." He groaned, stood up, and reached for the blanket. Lien Mei laughed. "You're getting soft." He smiled. "No, just found something worth carrying." He stepped inside, disappearing into warmth. Lien Mei turned to the orchard, to the land that had seen everything. The fear, the gamble, the choosing. And far beyond the trees, a new wind began to blow, steady, full of promise. Because that's what spring meant that year. Not flowers, not warmth, but return. To a self they thought they'd lost. To names spoken gently. To love earned quietly. And to a home no one could take. Not anymore.